Hi there, welcome to another informative show. Unfortunately, there are persons among us who are being dishonest. Approximately 4,000 persons who came into the country between March 18 and 23 have not contacted the Ministry of Health and Wellness as instructed to ensure that quarantine measures are being adhered to as part of efforts to limit the spread of COVID-19. If there is someone in your family or community who came into the island during that time and have not reported to the health officials, you can play your part in the fight against the virus. Confidentially share their whereabouts with the police. Call the JCF COVID-19 Command Center at 876-702-5106, 876-702-5103, or Crime Stop regular line at 311. This is Jamaica Magazine, and I'm Adrian Atkinson. Stay with us. There's much to know between the pages.
As the government continues to roll out its comprehensive response to COVID-19, we at the Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries continue to engage our stakeholders, our farmers and our fishermen to ensure that there's adequacy of food supply. We have meat, we have fresh produce, we have fruits to last us for at least another 3 months.
We have at least 90-day supply of all food and vegetable supply in this country, including meats. I also want to let you know that we have more than 90-day supply of all inputs, chemical fertilizers and so on, seeds including, to keep our farmers producing.
The ministry has had consultation across the sector with various stakeholders. We have done numerous assessments. I can assure the public that all agricultural products are in good supply and will be for the next 3 months at least. Specifically, our checks with areas like the poultry industry has shown that our chicken meat production will continue at an adequate level for the next 9 to 10 weeks and is secured, and we are working with the trade to ensure that production continues beyond this period adequately. Egg are in excellent supply, and production is expected to continue at this rate for the next 5 to 6 months. Irish potato, we have enough coming out of the field, and we are working with the trade to ensure storage that will continue to somewhere around the end of September.
I want to congratulate our farmers that they are the most resilient set of people in this whole world, and we will continue to work with them, and we are depending on you to pull the country through this crisis.
Up next, highlights of the recently held press conference on the coronavirus.
The government has been getting not necessarily requests, but persons seeking an understanding of government's position on the wearing of masks. And I'm going to invite the CMO to give us her guidance on this matter.
The Ministry of Health recommends the use of personal protective equipment by healthcare personnel. Our immediate priority is to secure personal protective equipment for health workers who are exposed by close contact with persons who are ill. Close contact means that health workers are within the 6 feet distance from their patients, and the wearing of personal protective equipment protects them from exposure. They cannot avoid close contact in order to care for patients, and that is why personal protective equipment are a must. The proper use of personal protective equipment by the health worker reduces the risk from high risk to no risk, even in environments of highest possible exposure. But even the highest trained healthcare worker has to be trained repeatedly in the donning and doffing of personal protective equipment. And the area where there is one of the greatest risk of infection is in the removal of a contaminated mask. The general public is encouraged to avoid close contact with possibly infected persons by several measures, including stay at home, avoid crowded situations, and avoid ill persons. Now, many persons are advocating for the routine wearing of masks by the general public. And yes, we agree that it can be helpful. It does offer some protection, especially where there are persons who are coughing and sneezing within your 3 to 6 feet personal space. It is not totally harmless, however, and the public must be cautious. Wearing a mask continuously is uncomfortable, and you must avoid touching and adjusting the mask, as if the mask is contaminated, you will contaminate your hands and infect yourselves and others. Perform hand hygiene every time you touch the mask. As soon as there is contamination of the mask, it must be discarded, as the risk gets higher of you contaminating yourself. If the mask is not worn properly, it will go up into your eyes. Do not rub or touch your eyes after touching the mask. Again, hand sanitize after touching the mask. Discard the mask if it becomes soiled or moist. This increases your risk of infecting yourself and others. You may be taking germs on the mask into several different settings and increasing the risk of transmission. Remove the mask by grasping the loops that are either at the back of your head or behind your ears and pulling forward and away from your face. Do not touch the front of the mask. The Ministry of Health and Wellness recommends the use of masks by persons who are ill with coughing and sneezing, persons who are quarantined or isolated at home with or without respiratory symptoms, and household members who care for the person or are in the same house. Persons who have COVID-19 and have been discharged from hospital should wear a mask for 2 weeks after they have been released and exercise infection protection control measures to safeguard family members. Persons who are at high risk of developing severe illness and complications of illnesses, such as the elderly and persons with chronic illnesses. These persons must avoid ill persons and minimize contact with the public. All other considerations are at the public's discretion. The wearing of the mask must be in addition to other infection control measures, such as regular hand washing and hand sanitizing, covering coughs and sneezes, and avoid touching your faces and avoid contact with ill persons.
A facial barrier can be helpful, whether it is a medical type mask like an N95, or maybe something like this, or probably something like this. It's a pretty nice looking mask. However, there are risks associated with them, and they are not substitutes for good practices that we have been saying. Washing the hands with soap and water. If you don't have, then sanitize. If you have to cough or sneeze, then the bend of your elbow is best, and don't touch anyone else afterwards. Maintaining your social distance. All of that is good. This would be in addition to. But the mask is a surface. And particularly in a situation where it is blocking the particles from coming in, they will rest on the surface. And like any other surface, the virus will live on it. So you have to be careful in, as you say, doffing, that is taking it off. So you can't hold the mask like this to take it off. You should take it off from here. If you're going to make that personal decision, then you should firstly seek not to deprive the medical professionals who would need the mask. But outside of that, it's your personal choice, bearing in mind the guidance that we have given.
To properly carry out a hand rub, apply a palmful of the product in your cupped hand, covering all surfaces. Rub your hands palm to palm. Rub your right palm over the back of your left hand with interlaced fingers and vice versa. Rub your hands palm to palm with fingers interlaced. Rub the back of your fingers to opposing palms with fingers interlocked. Rotationally rub backwards and forwards the clasped fingers of your right hand in your left palm and vice versa. Once your hands are dry, they are now safe.
There are some terms which have become a part of our COVID-19 lexicon. One of them is isolation. This measure definitely helps to prevent the spread of the virus from person to person. Take a look.
Isolation speaks more to persons who display symptoms, flu-like symptoms, and are therefore placed in a hospital setting under hospital supervision to treat with those symptoms, but at the same time to validate or rule out any possibility of them having the virus.
It's very important that we pick up these symptoms early so that we can isolate these patients. Under isolation conditions now, if this person continues to develop symptoms, then this person would be separated from other persons who they could pass the virus onto, and they will be nursed in a controlled situation to prevent any spread, either to other members of the public or to healthcare professionals.
Government, utilizing the available powers under the laws of Jamaica, instituted protocols for immediate isolation of persons entering the island exhibiting flu-like symptoms.
In terms of moving a patient to isolation, if they have come from an area of concern and they had any symptoms when they landed, we would have moved them into isolation. That is our protocol. And the symptoms, when we had put any symptoms, is out of an abundance of precaution.
On the grounds at the community level, where persons may have returned from countries with the virus and may have made contact with the wider community, quarantine and monitoring at home for symptoms will take place, and where symptoms are exhibited, they are isolated and testing is done. Isolation serves the same purpose as quarantine in that it keeps infected people away from those who are healthy to prevent the virus from spreading. However, it is reserved for those who are already sick and provides for treatment and recovery, usually in a hospital setting. When you are placed in isolation, the following is done.
We test persons who are ill that fit a particular, what we call a case definition. So you have to have all the criteria that is required for testing. If you meet that, then you are tested. And the test is done at the National Influenza Center. It's what we call a respiratory sample. So the mucus that we'll get from the lining is what is taken and then sent to the National Influenza Center, and is what it called a PCR test is done on it.
In isolation, what we have now is definitely a more restricted conditions. So we would have a room that is essentially sealed off from the rest of the hospital facility or whatever facility it is in, okay? Persons who enter into that bubble have to be completely protected, okay? So they protect themselves by wearing masks. They may wear a cap to cover the hair. They may wear face shield. They may wear gowns. It all depends on what kind of symptoms the person is having. For example, if you have somebody that is coughing a lot and there's a lot of droplets, then you are going to take more precautions, okay? So the persons that are entering into that room to interact with the patient have to make sure that they're fully protected. So they usually don those personal protective equipment on going in, and then on coming out, they remove all of those things and discard them. There are certain conditions under which we may isolate persons together. For example, if they're close family members and both are suspected to be infected and have the same kind of course together, so we may choose to isolate persons like that together. But for the most part, we will separate persons.
Isolation facilities have been set up in all hospitals across the island. Home isolation is possible only where persons with COVID-19 are well enough to receive care at home and there is an appropriate caregiver, a self-contained bedroom and bathroom where the patient can recover without sharing an immediate space with others, and there is access to personal protective gear. Regular cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting of all areas of the home, including high-touch areas, should be done daily. Practice good hygiene by washing your hands frequently using soap and water. Here's how you should do it while conserving water. Turn on the tap to wet your hands, then turn off the pipe. Lather your hands and the tap with soap. Turn on the tap and wash your hands, back, front, and in between fingers. Use some of the water to wash off the tap, then turn it off. Dry your hands with disposable hand towels. If you don't have running water, use a hand rub containing 62% or more alcohol. If hand sanitizers are not available, rubbing alcohol, Dettol, white rum, or household bleach will do the trick. And if all else fails, let hand washing and the handling of potable water be a two-person event. Each person will take turns pouring and washing hands with sitting water. Now is a good time to consider installing a tap on your containers to reduce the risk of water contamination. Faucets can be easily attached to drums, buckets, or 5-gallon water bottles. And to ensure that the outside of the containers are clean when recapping, disinfect it with hand rub containing alcohol that's 62% or more. The 5 R's of water conservation are also necessary to practice. Reduce water wastage by investing in water-saving devices. Reuse water at least twice before discarding. Replace leaking pipes, faucets, and other plumbing equipment. Recycle wastewater and use it for gardening, car washing, or cleaning of public spaces. And reclaim water through rainwater harvesting. We all must play our part to ensure there's water to combat the coronavirus and stave off prolonged drought.
The coronavirus has financially impacted many lives. A number of persons are out of jobs and some businesses have had to scale down or shutter doors. Up next, details of the government's stimulus package for those facing monetary challenges.
The world is facing the most serious disruption to our way of life since the Second World War. This pandemic is nothing like the world has ever experienced before. We need to be prepared for the worst and be ready for a very significant growth setback. As Minister of Finance, I wish to assure the people of Jamaica, Mr. Speaker, that the government will do all we can to ameliorate the effect of this pandemic and to give us the best chance of a speedy recovery. We will be implementing an unprecedented $25 billion fiscal stimulus consisting of a $15 billion tax reduction and tax measures and a $10 billion spending program. Our first goal will be to protect the neediest people from the worst effects of this COVID crisis. We'll be channeling $1.1 billion in additional funding to the Ministry of Labor and Social Security to be used to increase the PATH cash grants during this period, April to June. Pension payment for June will be automatically made on the basis of the last life certificate on hand without the need for renewal in April, Mr. Speaker. We will allocate an extra $150 million to the Ministry of Local Government to supplement the poor relief program and their budget in general. We will be reallocating expenditure in the MICOF budget to provide $200 million for relief to small farmers. For loans currently in repayment, the Student Loan Bureau will waive late fees for the period April, May, and June. And the Student Loan Bureau, very importantly, will defer the repayment of all loans, principal and interest, for 3 months. We care and help is on the way. We introduced the COVID allocation of resources for employees, the CARE program. We will introduce the Business Employee Support and Transfer of Cash, the Best Cash program, which will provide temporary cash transfers to registered businesses operating in the hotels, tours, and attraction segments of the tourism industry who are licensed based on the number of workers they keep employed who are under the income tax threshold of $1.5 million. We care and help is on the way. To qualify, each tourism business will need to apply for Best Cash by filling out the required form online. They would then file their payroll returns as usual on the 15th of April, the 15th of May, the 15th of June. And for each employee with taxable income that is less than the threshold of 1.5 million that they keep in their employ, the government will transfer funds at a rate of $9,000 per fortnight to that tourism-related business by direct transfer to their bank account, paid monthly, Mr. Speaker. For the months of April, May, and June, Mr. Speaker, that will equate to $54,000 for each employee that they retain. We also understand that employees from industries other than tourism will be laid off. For that reason, Mr. Speaker, we will implement the Supporting Employees with Transfer of Cash, the Set Cash program, which will provide temporary cash transfers to individuals where it can be verified that they lost their employment since the 10th of March. Employees, Mr. Speaker, will be required to apply online, filling out an online application where they'll provide details on themselves and the employment that they lost. We will be working with employers and with the umbrella groups of employers to encourage them to fill out those P45 forms and upload so that their employees can benefit from the CARE cash set payment. The unfortunate reality is that the employment status of many Jamaicans is informal. These are challenging cases, Mr. Speaker, but no less deserving. For the drivers on Juta, on Maxi, and JCAL who may not be in the formal system, Mr. Speaker, we will work with the umbrella organizations to see how we can best set up a verification system and how they can be included, Mr. Speaker. For the craft vendors in the various markets, we will work with those who control the venues from which you operate. And for the market vendors, Mr. Speaker, we will work with the municipal authorities who have registration lists. Apart from these categories I've mentioned, there are others. So, Mr. Speaker, what we will be doing is allocating a further $1 billion in additional funding to the Ministry of Labor and Social Security for them to work on this element of the CARE program, Mr. Speaker. We care and help is on the way. In response, Mr. Speaker, to the escalating dislocation that COVID is likely to have, Mr. Speaker, we need to step in with direct support to our small and micro businesses. All small businesses with sales of 50 million or less who file tax returns in the 2019-20 financial year and who file payroll returns indicating that they have employees on staff, Mr. Speaker, will be eligible for a one-time COVID small business grant of $100,000, Mr. Speaker. This intervention, we are budgeting that it will cost $800 million, and the government will make $1.2 billion available in the form of grants to businesses operating, especially small businesses operating in the tourism and related sectors, Mr. Speaker. Up to the 30th of June, Mr. Speaker, Tax Administration Jamaica will facilitate the issuing of one-off or single-use tax compliance certificates to businesses who may fall into non-compliance. Tax Administration Jamaica will issue no new summonses or initiate any new court proceedings or enforcement actions for non-compliance until after the 30th of June. However, Mr. Speaker, reminders and notices will continue to be generated. We care and help is on the way. This is a test of our economic resilience, and we will eventually come out ahead.
The Ministry of Labour and Social Security has been working assiduously to help to contain the spread of the dreaded coronavirus COVID-19. And I believe that it is my duty as Minister to encourage employers and business operators to put the proper mechanisms in place to protect workers and customers and themselves. Workers are the most important part of any organization, and they must be given all the necessary information, tools that they require to ensure that they can utilize the best safety and health practices. During this period, workers might be required to be quarantined or isolated for an extended period. In these instances, we are recommending to our employers that you exercise discretion beyond the provision of the Holiday with Pay Act 1974. We are also imploring employers to consider making use of the provisions under the Flexi Work Arrangement 2014 in order to ensure that where possible, staff can work from home, creating far less risk factors. I believe that as a nation, we have a responsibility to work together for a healthy and safe work environment.
You've reached the final page of the magazine. Thanks so much for being with us on today's journey. Another Jamaica Magazine unfolds tomorrow, so come back same time on this same station, or watch all our programs on the JIS YouTube channel or website. Until then, click on our social media pages for more information. While there, please subscribe to our pages so you can stay in the know. I'm Adrian Atkinson, encouraging you to stay home and flatten the curve.
This has been a production of the Jamaica Information Service, the voice of Jamaica.